This is a call for vengeance. Welcome to today's show. This video is very important to me, and it's very important that you listen to some of the things that I'm going to explain, because I'm going to try to explain it as simply put as I can. I know a lot of people didn't watch the video that I did that had Joe Biden in the thumbnail with Elmo, where I was talking about how Elmo went viral. But it's really important that we talk about that again and in more detail, because these are the types of things that bother me so much so, is watching humanity get flushed down the toilet by these psychopaths. And that's what's happening here. Everybody's blaming each other. Everybody's thinking that it's people like me that are the problem in society, when it's actually the government themselves and the mainstream media, okay? The term that they're using is trauma dump. This is what you'll hear, and I'll show you a compilation of clips from the Sinclair Broadcasting Group, where they're constantly talking about trauma dump. The whole situation with Elmo, a trauma dump. All the national media picked up on it. All the local news affiliates picked up on it, because they're trying to normalize trauma, because of course the word trauma ties into MK Ultra, trauma-based mind control. So when I've talked about MK Ultra in the past, there's people out there who listen to this channel because they've been programmed and don't understand what MK Ultra even is. I'll use the most basic description of MK Ultra, and I'll even give it to them, since they love to give us Wikipedia definitions of things, because people out there think mind control is not real, right? If you look up MK Ultra, even Wikipedia tells you it was an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, intended to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations, et cetera, okay? Which go on to brainwashing and psychological torture. So we can look at that and people go, well, you know, the government used it because they were trying to get confessions out of people. That's not what they were doing at all. They were doing it on people because they were seeing if they could create mind-controlled slaves, which is really ultimately what this is about. You could look at MK Ultra, and you could look at things like Project Artichoke. These are things that the CIA did, okay? They were illegal activities done on civilians. They never stopped doing it. They're doing it on a mass scale now. So we can look at those operations and realize that they're real, okay? They're trying to create mind control slaves. So there's even a book for people out there, an old book from Fritz Springmeier, the Illuminati formula used to create mind control slaves, okay? And he even writes in his book, when the mind and emotions are put under extreme stress, they break and create a new mental emotional state. It is within these mental states born of trauma that the mind can be conditioned. That someone would do this intentionally is unthinkable, yet it has been done and tested to the degree of a science. Trauma-based mind control has been used by criminal organizations to maintain secrecy and ensure every order is followed to the letter. Through this process, you get the undetectable total mind control slave. They have inflicted this onto all of us, which means everybody who has some type of media in their lives is getting inflicted with trauma-based mind control. Now, I'm going to play for you some of the clips, okay, from Elmo on the news. And specifically, I want you to listen to how they're literally using their Sinclair Broadcasting crap, where they're talking about trauma dumps. They're normalizing this. And even listen to Jake Tapper of CNN, who asked Elmo Elmo has asked us all how we're doing. So Jake Tapper decided to ask Elmo himself, and he has Elmo on. I'll spare you the part with Elmo, because it's unbelievable that we're having on national TV these anchors treating us like children. They're talking to us like children, because that's exactly what we're under. That's the hypnosis that we're under. And Jake Tapper, I'll ask you a side question. How's Comet Pizza? Yeah, Jake Tapper, of course, favorite pizzeria, Comet Pizza. But don't wonder how Jake Tapper is one of the main correspondents on CNN. This entire system is psychologically, demonically sinister. And I even commented under Jake Tapper's video and had my comment deleted within an hour about how people like Jake Tapper are the ones responsible for trauma-based mind control. They're responsible. So if you're out there and you're going, what is trauma? I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what trauma is. Like, what is the clinical term of, trauma, and what does trauma do? Trauma causes people things like PTSD, depression, or other mental health symptoms. So then how are the majority of people under trauma? Well, let's listen to this clip and keep a close listen, I should say, as they bring on a psychotherapist that lets you know things like racism, things like loneliness, things like impending wars, things like the political spectrum are causing trauma onto people. And this is just proof that this is nothing more than a trauma-based mind control operation on civilians.
All right, so we got to get to this Elmo story, all right? I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it all over social media, specifically X, of people who are just going hard in the paint with Elmo and trauma dumping.
In our health lead, the Sesame Street word of the day is trauma dump. Okay, that's 2 words, but Elmo learned all about trauma dumps on Monday after he asked a seemingly simple question on X, formerly known as Twitter. Elmo is just checking in. How is everybody doing? Turns out everybody is not okay. And by everybody, I mean seemingly everybody. Elmo was flooded with responses.
So why do you think this resonated so much with folks of every strata, every economic class, and everyone in between?
I think 2 things came up for me intuitively. One was this enduring mental health crisis that we are in. People are responding appropriately with mental health struggles to war, to political fear and dread, to racism, to loneliness epidemic, among other things. And then there's also the Elmo part. There are these associations to Elmo of nostalgia, childhood, safety, security. So for me, that really speaks to the need for safety and genuineness to allow people to open up. Elmo really spoke to everybody's inner childs, and their inner adults, came out and unloaded.
Yeah.
So, of course, we bring on the psychotherapist, who probably should come to me for some therapy because she's clearly under a delusional spell, sitting there talking about how racism and how all these things that are built and concepts in the mind caused from the mainstream media. This is the media. You wouldn't even know that racism existed. Maybe you know a guy who's, doesn't like you because your skin color. Okay, not on the scale they tell you that it's on. You wouldn't know about wars. You wouldn't know about any of this political nightmare stuff that they're doing where they're gaslighting both sides to the point of absolute driving them insane. Both sides driving them insane because both parties are guilty, right? All of this stuff, loneliness, these are things brought about by them. They've created fear. They've made people regress, right? The adults are not growing up. Young teens are staying in teenagehood. They're not turning into grown-ups. People are afraid of relationships. They're doing everything online with pornography, staying away from people, not dating women, afraid to even pick up or hit on a woman because it's offensive and it's sexist. This is all done by design by them. Thus, it's leading to people being lonely, people being depressed, etc., right? Okay? Then she goes on to talk about, it's normal for all of these people to turn to Elmo. Right? As insane as it sounds, right? This is what the point we're at, where we're literally under trauma-based mind control on a day-to-day basis. The mainstream media is bringing Elmo on TV and talking to an adult audience because the kids aren't watching the news, the adults are, like they're children. And then they don't tell you, this therapist doesn't tell you, you could do a basic study, okay? A basic study of why adults behave like children. Why do they? Because they regress. Right? I'll read you a definition. Regression, a popular but frequently forgotten defense mechanism, is regression. When things get too difficult and a person feels vulnerable, defense mechanisms kick in as a way of self-preservation. Regression is a return to childlike behavior as a way to avoid adult-like reality and responsibility. So adults are behaving like children because they're under trauma-based mind control from the mainstream media. The news is doing this to you. Donald Trump is doing this to you. Joe Biden is doing this to you. Hollywood celebrities are doing this to you. So everybody out there thinks they're depressed. They're telling you you're depressed and there's a mental health crisis for the wrong reasons. They're doing it in many different ways. They're doing it with this. They're doing it with frequencies from those 5G towers, radiation exposure. They are killing all of us. I'm so sick of seeing people so depressed and miserable. It breaks my heart. It really does. It breaks my heart on both sides of the aisle. You see the people out there that think people like me are trying to hurt society or hurt people who are trans and all this stuff. They don't realize what's been inflicted on them from these monsters. They don't even believe that mind control is real because they're such narcissists. Then you look at these operations that the CIA has done and they're like, oh, well, they experimented in the 1970s. Oh, and they stopped? Why were they experimenting then? Oh, because they were going to use it as a war tactic against Russia or China, the boogeyman. Is that why? Oh, and then they figured out how they could use trauma-based mind control to create an army of mind control slaves for them. And that's exactly where we are now. Now, you look at the enhancement and the increase in technology in our society, then look no further than how we have a full-on society of mind control slaves, or as I like to call them, just hive-minded sheeple. Well, we could call them whatever you want. So when we see stories like this, what we should do is we all should go, whoa, that's frightening. That's scary, right? Then you look at the origins of Sesame Street, okay, which is on PBS, which is state-run media. Okay, if you don't know state-run media, it means the government controls PBS, which is why Sesame Street gets all these celebrities on there to influence, et cetera, why PBS pushes Magic Potion, why PBS pushes Two Dads, all these things I've covered with Sesame Street, because it's state-run. But now all of the media is state-run. They're hitting you with trauma-based mind control on a day-in and day-out basis. And they want you to think that it's perfectly normal. They bring these therapists on TV. They have these, they bring Elmo himself on TV and they tell you that it's okay for you to be, to vent and to feel this way. It's not okay for people to feel this way because they wouldn't be feeling this way if it wasn't for our government and the mainstream media. People wouldn't be on suicide watch. People wouldn't have the government doing assisted suicides if the government themselves weren't causing this. And they're like, it's just natural. It's a tough time to be alive. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of crazy alt-right people. That's what they'll blame it on. Oh, there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theorists out there. They're the ones who are doing it. They call us conspiracy theorists because they don't want you to get help. They don't want you to wake up. They want you stuck in a hive mind of depression and suicidal thoughts and never being fulfilled and always wondering why you will never be fulfilled. Because you're living in a matrix. You're living in a reality that they've created in your own mind. Okay? You're under mind enslavement, imprisonment of the mind. Told a bowl full of lies your whole life about space, about history, all make-believe crap, evolution, make-believe. Humans are not fulfilling themselves because they're not doing the things they were put here to do. You weren't put here to be entertained 24/7. Oh, I'm bored. I want to be entertained, right? Well, the government feeds you poison. Oh, go get your McDonald's. Go get your food from this place covered in chemicals. You don't have to worry about what's in it. The FDA approved it. You could trust the FDA. The same people put weed killer in your food. This is the type of stuff that should wake people up. They should see a story like this and they should go, Elmo tweets out. And then almost like in a psychosis, the majority of society respond to Elmo as if Elmo is a personal friend in their life, which immediately tells us there's a psychosis going on, which of course I've known about for quite some time, and most of you have as well, but some of you are new to it. So that should make you go, hey, there's something wrong here. Okay, Elmo isn't even real, yet people are tweeting to Elmo. And then they're like, oh, it's just a comforting mechanism. They're normalizing all of this stuff, telling you that it's perfectly fine to be under trauma. They're the ones who are putting you under it. So take it from the standpoint of the fact that people are just responding to Elmo, a puppet in the first place. And then considering Elmo their friend and saying, oh, I'm lonely and I don't have anyone to talk to. They've created all this. They've done all this. Whether, from, like I mentioned earlier, just the little things too with people interacting, being afraid to speak to one another because they'll offend somebody. Or they don't want to get, told they're sexually harassing a woman by telling her she's beautiful. So they're lonely. They're not around people. They stay out online 24/7, stuck in a vacuum cleaner where they don't want you to find people like me to help you come out of this. This is so sad to see. It is so sad to see. I hope you will share this with people. Just to recap, right? If someone's like, I don't really even understand what the guy's saying, I try to break it down as simply put as I can. They're using the term trauma dump like it's a normal term. They're like trauma dump and everyone's like, oh, that's a trauma dump. They don't even know what a trauma dump is, right? The definition's not a clinical term. This is according to articles out there. Trauma dumping is when someone unloads the details of their traumatic experience onto someone without regard for its impact. Okay, so the things that people are tweeting to Elmo are quote-unquote traumatic experiences. And they're all things that are brought about from their day-to-day lives that are brought about from the mainstream media, okay? You're telling Elmo you're traumatized because, you didn't like the, t-shirt that somebody out there was wearing. It offended you. It traumatized you. That's what they're creating, okay? So that you have trauma dumping, the term that's out there. Then you talk about MK Ultra, which in its core is trauma-based mind control. And what they use it for is just like I said, the quote from Fritz Springmeier, okay? When the mind and emotions are put under extreme stress, they break and create a new mental emotional state. It is within these mental states born of trauma that the mind can be conditioned. That someone would do this intentionally is unthinkable, yet it has been done and tested to the degree of science. And again, how many times have you heard me say that the hardest part for people to wrap their heads around is thinking that anyone would intentionally cause this on people? But when you hear that Jeffrey Dahmer did it, or you hear that Ted Bundy did it, you're fascinated by the story. You're like, oh, this is just an isolated incident of a really sick person. Then look at your Congress, look at all these people like Bill Gates and realize that these are the biggest psychopaths that have ever walked the earth. And they want nothing more than to have the blood of billions of people on their hands in as many ways as possible, which is why they don't even need the potions to depopulate. The government's stepping in, Trudeau and company and other countries are stepping in and saying, hey, we'll assist you with your suicide on other people's tax money. How's that sound? Instead of going, whoa, what? Let's get these people out of here. Because 25 years ago when Jack Kevorkian was doing assisted suicide, he went to court for, a crime, assisted murder. Now the government's the one doing it, and still no one's suspicious. You are under a trance. You are under a hypnosis. The Elmo experiment that they just did just proves this. But people look at it as nothing more than that. They're like, it's normal. Elmo's from my childhood. Oh yeah. And what is regression as a human being? Under the basics of psychology, humans regress and act and return to childlike behavior when they want to avoid adult-like reality. They're doing that deliberately because they don't want you to face what they're doing and face them and stop this from occurring. They're telling you it's normal to regress. It's normal for you to pick up your Elmo and to talk to it like it's a human being and to tell them your inner deepest thoughts. They'll probably soon tell you it's normal to have intercourse with Elmo too. Well, they already do, don't they? When people or things get too difficult and people feel vulnerable, defense mechanisms kick in, and as a way of self-preservation, adults behave like children and regress. Welcome to the world in 2024, created by these people, and they're rubbing it in your faces in the mainstream media, on the news, talking about trauma dumps, and nobody's going, why in the world is this happening? Oh, well, because of the war, because of political conflict, because of racism. Oh, right. And if you shut it all off, would you see these things going on in your day-to-day life? No, you would not. And that woman failed to explain because she's a puppet on the mainstream media news or the whatever news, and she's sitting there going, there's all these bad things in the world. All these bad things formulated by design to put you into trauma, to make you a trauma-based mind control slave. I thank you for being here. Hope you're all well. Share this video. God bless all of you, as always, and your families.